My name is Cathryn, and I'm 28 years old. As I unlocked my apartment door after a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The faint scent of my mother's floral perfume hung in the air. I rushed to my bedroom to find my diary spread open on my nightstand, with my mother Diane sitting casually on my bed, reading through my most private thoughts. "You know, Cathryn," she said, without looking up. "If you didn't hide things from me, I wouldn't have to do this." That's when I made my decision. I was going to disappear without a trace. Before we dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button if you've ever felt your privacy was violated, and subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries with family. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about family dynamics. Growing up, my mother Diane never understood the concept of personal boundaries. As far back as I can remember, she would enter my room without knocking, read my diary, and go through my belongings whenever she felt like it. When I was 14, I came home from school to find her sitting on my bed with my diary in her hands, tears streaming down her face. She had read about my first crush and was devastated that I hadn't told her about it. Instead of apologizing for violating my privacy, she grounded me for keeping secrets. My father, Robert, would always dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand, saying, "Your mother just worries about you, Cathryn. She loves you." This pattern continued throughout my teenage years, with Diane finding increasingly creative ways to invade my privacy. She would read my text messages, show up unannounced at my friends' houses, and even called my high school boyfriend's mother to check up on me. When I went away to college, I thought I would finally have some freedom, but I was wrong. Diane would drive 3 hours to surprise visit me at my dorm, letting herself in with the spare key I had foolishly given her for emergencies. She would go through my mail, rearrange my room, and leave notes telling me what I was doing wrong with my life. The first major attack happened when I was 24 and had just moved into my first apartment after graduation. I came home from work one evening to find my mother in my living room installing what looked like smoke detectors. When I asked what she was doing, she cheerfully explained that she was installing security cameras so she could keep an eye on me, since I lived alone in what she considered a dangerous neighborhood. I was horrified and demanded she remove them immediately, but she refused, claiming it was for my own safety. The next day, I called a security company and had them professionally removed, but the damage was done. I felt violated and paranoid in my own home. I changed the locks, but somehow Diane still managed to gain access. I would come home to find things slightly out of place or food missing from my refrigerator. Once I found a new bottle of shampoo in my bathroom that wasn't the brand I used. It was subtle, but I knew she had been there. My anxiety skyrocketed, and I started having trouble sleeping. I would jump at every sound, convinced it was my mother letting herself in again. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who listened patiently as I described my situation. She validated my feelings and suggested I start documenting every instance of my mother's boundary violations. "This isn't normal, Cathryn," she told me firmly. "Your mother's behavior is controlling and unhealthy. You need to protect yourself." That conversation was a turning point for me. I bought a journal specifically for documenting Diane's intrusions, and I started researching ways to secure my apartment more effectively. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle for my autonomy and sanity. The violations escalated when I discovered my mother had been sharing my private information with extended family members. During a family dinner at my Aunt Brenda's house, my cousin casually mentioned my recent gynecological appointment details that I had only shared with my mother in confidence. I was mortified and immediately confronted Diane about it later that evening. She defended her actions by saying, "We're family, Cathryn. There shouldn't be secrets between us." A week later, my brother Michael called me out of the blue, demanding to know why I hadn't told the family about my recent health scare. I was shocked because I had only shared this information with my mother during a private conversation. When I asked how he knew, he admitted that Mom had told everyone, claiming she needed their prayers and support. "Why do you always hide things from us, Cathryn?" he accused. "Mom just wants to be involved in your life. Is that so wrong?" I felt betrayed not only by my mother but by my brother as well. He had always been the reasonable one in the family, the one I thought understood me. But now he was siding with Diane, completely dismissing my right to privacy. Determined to protect myself, I invested in a high-tech security system with facial recognition technology and motion sensors. I changed my locks again, this time to a smart lock that required a unique code and couldn't be duplicated. For a few weeks, I felt a sense of relief. The system alerts showed no unauthorized entries, and I began to relax, thinking I had finally outsmarted my mother. What I didn't realize was that the betrayal was coming from an unexpected source. My younger sister Emily had always seemed sympathetic to my situation. She would listen to my complaints about Mom and even offered to talk to Diane on my behalf. "Mom doesn't mean to be this way, Cathryn," Emily would say. She just loves you so much and doesn't know how to show it properly." I confided in Emily about my new security measures, even sharing how the system worked. I trusted her completely. Meanwhile, I was growing increasingly desperate for an escape. I started researching apartments in different cities, imagining a life where I could finally be free from my mother's constant intrusion. I looked at places in neighboring states, calculating how far I would need to go to feel truly safe. The stress was taking a toll on me. I was having panic attacks and trouble focusing at work. There were days when I felt like giving up, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe my family was right. Maybe I was being too sensitive, too private. During one particularly low moment, I even considered apologizing to my mother and accepting her behavior as normal. But then I would come home to find something slightly out of place, or receive a text from a relative referencing a private conversation I'd had with my mother, and the cycle of anger and determination would begin again. I was trapped in a nightmare of my mother's making, and I didn't know how to escape. The third major attack came when my mother's interference directly impacted my career. I had been working as a registered nurse at City General Hospital for 3 years and was up for a promotion to charge nurse. The position required additional certifications, and I had spent months studying and completing the necessary paperwork. The day before my final interview, I went to my briefcase to retrieve my documents, only to find them missing. I tore my apartment apart looking for them, growing increasingly panicked. When I finally found them in the trash can under a pile of coffee grounds, they were ruined. Important certificates were torn and pages were water damaged beyond recognition. I immediately knew who was responsible. Confronting my mother was useless. She would just deny it or claim she was helping by cleaning my apartment. Instead, I had to call my supervisor and explain that I couldn't make the interview. Fortunately, she was understanding and rescheduled it for 2 weeks later, giving me time to replace the damaged documents. At work the next day, my coworker Jennifer noticed how distressed I was. She pulled me aside during our break and asked what was wrong. Something about her kind eyes and genuine concern made me open up. I told her everything about my mother's behavior, the break-ins, the cameras, and now the destroyed documents. To my surprise, Jennifer didn't judge me or tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she shared her own story of dealing with a controlling family member. "My sister used to go through my things and read my journals," she told me. "It took years, but I finally had to cut off contact to protect my mental health." Jennifer became my first true ally in this battle. She helped me research secure housing options in different states, even taking time during her days off to call apartment complexes for me. "You need to get away from her, Cathryn," she insisted. "This isn't just about privacy anymore. This is about your safety and sanity." With Jennifer's help, I found a new apartment in a secure building in a city 3 hours away. The complex had 24-hour security required key card access to all entrances and had a strict no visitor policy without resident approval. It felt like a fortress, exactly what I needed. I began secretly moving my belongings in small batches over several weeks, using my days off to transport boxes when I knew my family was at work. I rented a storage unit near the new apartment to keep my things until I was ready to make the final move. Jennifer even helped me one weekend using her SUV to transport larger items. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me as we carried boxes into my new apartment. "You deserve to feel safe in your own home." As an extra precaution, I set up a P.O. box in the new city and began redirecting my mail there. I knew my mother would try to track me through my mail, and I wanted to cut off that avenue of invasion. Each small step toward freedom gave me a bit more strength, but I was still terrified that my mother would somehow find out my plan and stop me before I could escape. The final move day arrived carefully planned for a Saturday when my family was occupied with a community event that Diane never missed. I had been packing for weeks, hiding boxes in my car and at Jennifer's place. The night before, I slept on an air mattress with just a backpack of essentials, everything else already gone. As the sun rose on my move day, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. Jennifer arrived early with coffee and pastries, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions I was experiencing. We worked quickly, loading the remaining items into a rental truck I had parked discreetly around the corner. By noon, my old apartment was empty cleaned and the keys returned to the landlord. I took one last look at the place that had been both my sanctuary and my prison, then drove away without looking back. The relief I felt arriving at my new apartment was overwhelming. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. The space was mine alone, with no history of violations or intrusions. I spent the first night sleeping on the floor, surrounded by boxes, but it was the most peaceful sleep I had had in years. 2 weeks into my new life, I was unpacking a box of old photo albums when I made a shocking discovery. Tucked inside one album was a spare key to my old apartment, the one I thought I had lost months ago. Attached to it was a small note in Emily's handwriting. "Just in case you get locked out, sis, love you. My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. Emily hadn't found the key, she had taken it from my purse and given it to our mother. All those times I wondered how Diane was getting into my apartment despite the changed locks. It was Emily who was enabling her. I immediately checked my phone and found text messages between Emily and Diane that I had somehow missed. They were planning surprise visits to my apartment with Emily providing my work schedule and information about when I would be out. "Cathryn's working late on Tuesday." One message from Emily read, "Perfect time to water her plants and check if she's eating properly." The betrayal was devastating. Emily had been my confidant, the one person in my family I thought understood my struggle. All along, she had been feeding information to our mother, playing both sides. That evening, I called Emily, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. When she answered, I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I know about the key, Emily," I said, my voice cold. "I know you've been letting Mom into my apartment." There was silence on the other end, then a sob. "I'm so sorry, Cathryn," she cried. "Mom kept pressuring me, saying you needed help and that I was being a bad sister if I didn't help her look after you. She made me feel so guilty." Her explanation did little to ease my pain. "You had a choice, Emily," I said firmly. "You chose to betray me." That night, I made another difficult decision. I changed my phone number and set up a new email address, cutting off contact with my family temporarily. I needed space to heal without their influence or manipulation. As I blocked their numbers and emails, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that I was finally taking control of my life, but guilt for cutting off my family, especially Emily, who was clearly under our mother's influence. That night, I cried myself to sleep, mourning the family I wished I had but knew would never exist. 2 weeks after my move, the silence was broken when Jennifer called me at work. "Your family is looking for you," she said urgently. "Your mother called the hospital asking if you were okay. She said you haven't been answering your phone and she's worried something happened to you." My heart sank. I had hoped to have more time before they discovered I was gone. That evening, I received a flood of emails from various family members, all expressing concern about my disappearance. My Aunt Brenda wrote that Diane was, beside with worry, convinced something terrible had happened to me. My brother Michael sent a series of increasingly angry messages, accusing me of being selfish and inconsiderate for not letting anyone know where I was. The situation escalated quickly when my mother filed a missing person report claiming I was mentally unstable and possibly suicidal. I learned about this when two police officers showed up at my new apartment door responding to the report. The embarrassment was acute as my new neighbors watched the interaction. "We understand there's been a family dispute," one officer said kindly after I explained the situation. "But your mother is genuinely concerned. We advise family counseling to resolve these issues." I assured them I was fine and not in danger, but the damage was done. My mother had now involved law enforcement painting me as mentally unstable to justify her behavior. The fourth attack came when I discovered Diane had used the police report to try to gain access to my financial accounts. I received an email from my bank alerting me to suspicious activity. Someone had attempted to withdraw $5,000 from my savings account, claiming it was for emergency medical expenses. Fortunately, the bank had flagged the unusual activity and required additional verification, which Diane couldn't provide. Panicked, I immediately froze all my accounts and opened new ones at a different bank in my new city. I had to spend hours on the phone with customer service representatives explaining the situation and arranging for the transfer of my funds. The invasion was now affecting every aspect of my life: my home, my job, and now my finances. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, unable to relax even in my new fortress of an apartment. The stress was manifesting physically in headaches, stomach issues, and a constant feeling of anxiety. I found myself checking the locks multiple times before bed and jumping at every unexpected noise. Jennifer was my rock during this time, bringing over dinner and listening as I vented my frustrations. "You did nothing wrong, Cathryn," she reminded me repeatedly. "You have every right to protect yourself and your privacy." Her support was invaluable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter where I went or what I did, my mother would find a way to invade my life. The thought was exhausting, and I began to wonder if I would ever truly be free. My landlord, Mr. Harrison, became my second ally quite by accident. A retired police officer in his late 60s, he had noticed the increased activity around my apartment delivery, people maintenance requests for additional security features, and now the police visit. One afternoon, he knocked on my door with a concerned expression. "Everything all right, Miss Cathryn?" he asked. "You seem to be having some trouble." Something about his kind eyes and paternal demeanor made me open up about my situation. I told him everything about my mother's behavior, the break-ins, and now the attempt to access my bank accounts. As I spoke, his expression grew more serious. "This isn't just a family dispute," he said firmly. "This is harassment and it's illegal. You have rights and there are steps you can take to protect yourself." Mr. Harrison became an unexpected source of support and guidance. He helped me understand my legal options, explaining that I could file for a restraining order if the harassment continued. He even offered to testify on my behalf if needed. "I've seen situations like this before," he told me. "Controlling family members can be the most dangerous because they know all your weaknesses." The fifth attack came when my mother tried to get me fired from my job. She called the hospital administration claiming I was mentally unstable, had a substance abuse problem, and was unfit to care for patients. She even fabricated stories about me making dangerous medical errors. The hospital took these allegations seriously, and I was temporarily suspended pending an investigation. I was devastated. Nursing wasn't just a job for me, it was my calling, my passion. The thought of losing it because of my mother's lies was unbearable. Jennifer stood by me through this crisis, helping me gather evidence to refute the claims. We collected character references from colleagues' performance reviews, and even a letter from Dr. Martinez confirming my mental stability. "We'll fight this," Jennifer insisted. "Your mother can't destroy your career." The investigation was stressful and humiliating. I had to answer deeply personal questions about my mental health and family life. But with Jennifer's support and the evidence we had gathered, I was eventually cleared of all allegations and reinstated at work. The experience left me shaken, though. My mother's attacks were becoming more sophisticated and damaging. She wasn't just invading my privacy anymore, she was trying to destroy my life. As if things weren't bad enough, my father, Robert, got involved, calling me to demand I stop this nonsense and return home. "Your mother is beside herself with worry," he said angrily. "If you don't come back and apologize, we'll disown you. Is that what you want?" His threat didn't have the effect he intended. Instead of scaring me into compliance, it strengthened my resolve. "Do what you have to do, Dad," I replied calmly. "I'm done letting you and Mom control my life." That conversation was a turning point for me. I realized that my family's love came with conditions, that I had to sacrifice my autonomy, privacy, and happiness to earn it. And I was no longer willing to pay that price. With Mr. Harrison's guidance, I began legal proceedings to protect myself from my family's harassment. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in family law and restraining orders, gathering evidence of my mother's actions. The police reports, the bank records, the emails, and the documentation I had kept of all her violations. It was time to fight back legally. The legal battle was just beginning when my family launched their most aggressive attack yet. One Saturday morning, I was startled by a loud commotion outside my apartment door. When I looked through the peephole, my heart sank. My entire family was there. My mother, father, brother, and even Emily. They were knocking loudly, calling my name and attracting the attention of my neighbors. "Cathryn, we know you're in there," my mother shouted. "We're not leaving until you talk to us." I called building security, but by the time they arrived, my family had escalated their attempts to get in. My father was trying to force the door while my brother was attempting to bypass the keycard system. Emily stood to the side, crying and pleading with me to come out. "We're just trying to help you, Cathryn," she sobbed. "Mom's worried sick." The scene was chaotic and humiliating. Neighbors were watching some recording with their phones. I felt trapped and exposed, my sanctuary violated once again. When security finally escorted them out of the building, I collapsed on my couch, shaking and in tears. This was my second near-defeat moment. The pressure was immense, and for a fleeting second, I considered giving in. Maybe it would be easier to just go back to let them have their way if it meant the harassment would stop. But then I thought about everything I had been through, all the violations and betrayals, and my resolve hardened. I stood firm and proceeded with filing for a restraining order against my mother. The process was emotionally draining but necessary. I had to detail every incident of harassment, every violation, every lie. My lawyer was supportive and understanding, guiding me through the complex legal system. As we prepared for the hearing, I also began therapy with a new therapist, Dr. Evans, who specialized in family trauma and emotional abuse. She helped me process the complex emotions I was experiencing: anger, guilt, grief, and fear. "Whoa, what you're feeling is completely normal," she assured me. "You're grieving the family you wish you had while fighting for the life you deserve." I continued documenting everything, building a case against my mother. I saved emails, recorded phone calls where legal, and kept a detailed journal of every contact and attempted contact. It was exhausting work, but I knew it was necessary to protect myself. The counterattack was taking its toll, though. I was losing weight, having trouble sleeping, and my anxiety was at an all-time high. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the stress of it all. But Jennifer and Mr. Harrison continued to support me, reminding me why I was fighting this battle. "You're not just fighting for yourself, Cathryn," Mr. Harrison told me during one of our conversations. "You're fighting for your right to exist as an autonomous adult, to make your own choices and live your own life. That's a battle worth fighting." Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who wouldn't respect them? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else going through a similar situation. If you found this story compelling, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content about setting healthy boundaries and finding strength in difficult circumstances. Thank you for watching, and remember, your mental health and peace of mind are worth fighting for, even if it means making difficult decisions about family relationships. The day of the restraining order hearing arrived with a mix of dread and determination. I hadn't seen my family in weeks, and now I would be facing them in a courtroom. Jennifer drove me to the courthouse, her presence a calming influence in the storm of my anxiety. "You've got this, Cathryn," she said as we parked. "Just tell the truth and let the evidence speak for itself." The courtroom was intimidating with its high ceilings and formal atmosphere. My family was already there when I arrived, my mother looking pale and fragile, my father stern and disapproving, my brother angry and resentful. Emily sat apart from them, avoiding eye contact with me. The hearing began with my lawyer presenting our case. She methodically detailed each incident of harassment: the break-ins, the cameras, the destroyed documents, the attempt to access my bank accounts, and the false allegations to my employer. She presented evidence photos, emails, bank records, and testimony from Jennifer and Mr. Harrison. Then it was my turn to testify. As I stood in the witness box, I felt a strange sense of calm. I looked directly at my mother as I spoke, describing years of privacy violations and emotional manipulation. I explained how her behavior had affected my mental health, my career, and my relationships. "I love my mother," I said, my voice steady, "but I cannot allow her to continue violating my boundaries and controlling my life. I'm not asking her to disappear from my life. I'm asking her to respect me as an adult, with the right to privacy and autonomy." My mother's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as an unstable, ungrateful daughter who was overreacting to normal parental concern. But I held my ground, answering each question calmly and truthfully. The most difficult moment came when my father took the stand. He testified against me, claiming I had always been difficult and overly sensitive. He described my mother as a caring, devoted parent who was simply worried about my well-being. "Cathryn has always been dramatic," he said, looking directly at the judge. "She's blowing this whole thing out of proportion." Jennifer and Mr. Harrison testified next, corroborating my account of events and providing character references. Their testimony was powerful and credible, especially Mr. Harrison's, given his background as a police officer. The judge listened attentively to all the testimony, reviewing the evidence carefully. After what felt like an eternity, she rendered her decision. Based on the evidence presented and testimony heard, she said, her voice firm and clear, "I am granting a temporary restraining order against Diane Miller. She is legally required to stay at least 500 feet away from Cathryn Miller, her residence, and her workplace. All forms of communication must cease immediately." The relief I felt was overwhelming. For the first time in years, I had legal protection from my mother's harassment. As we left the courtroom, my brother Michael approached me cautiously. "I'm sorry, Cathryn," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize how bad things were. Mom always made it sound like you were the one being unreasonable." Emily also approached me later, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry for everything," she sobbed. "I felt so much pressure from Mom, but that's no excuse for betraying your trust. I hope someday you can forgive me." I accepted their apologies, cautiously maintaining the boundaries I had fought so hard to establish. I appreciate your apologies, I told them both. But things can't go back to the way they were. If we're going to have a relationship in the future, it needs to be on different terms that respect my autonomy and privacy. My mother said nothing as she walked past, her expression a mixture of anger and defeat. I knew this wasn't the end of our story, but for the first time I felt hopeful about the future. The months following the restraining order were a period of slow, deliberate healing. The immediate relief was followed by a complex mix of emotions: grief for the family relationship I had lost, guilt for the pain I had caused, and a lingering fear that my mother might find a way around the legal restrictions. Dr. Evans helped me navigate these feelings, providing tools and strategies to process the trauma. Healing isn't linear, she reminded me during one session. There will be good days and bad days. What's important is that you continue to prioritize your well-being. I reconnected with my brother Michael, who gradually came to understand my perspective. He shared stories of his own experiences with our mother's controlling behavior, moments he had dismissed as normal but now recognized as unhealthy. We established a new relationship based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. Emily also reached out periodically, and while I maintained distance, I appreciated her efforts to make amends. I found myself building a new support system: friends who respected my boundaries, colleagues who valued my contributions at work, and neighbors who greeted me with genuine warmth. Jennifer remained my closest confidant, her friendship a constant source of strength and validation. 6 months after the restraining order was granted, I had established a new routine that felt both safe and fulfilling. I had been promoted to charge nurse at the hospital, a position I had worked hard to earn. My apartment was now truly a sanctuary, decorated to my taste and filled only with things that brought me joy. One afternoon, I received a message through a third party, my mother attempting to contact me through a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. The message was brief. "I miss you. Can we talk?" I considered it briefly, then declined. It wasn't the right time, and perhaps it never would be. I had learned that sometimes the most loving act is to protect yourself even from family. As I sat on my balcony that evening watching the sunset, I reflected on my journey. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, it had all led me to this moment of peace and self-acceptance. I had learned that family isn't just about blood relations, but about mutual respect, trust, and support. I was building my own chosen family, one that honored my boundaries and celebrated my independence. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Family dynamics rarely change overnight, but I was prepared to navigate it with strength and self-respect. I had learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being. These were lessons that would serve me for the rest of my life. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I felt a sense of closure and hope. The story of my relationship with my mother wasn't over, but the chapter of victimhood was. I was no longer just reacting to her behavior. I was actively creating my own life on my own terms, and that was the greatest victory of all.